Story 1. It was an ordinary afternoon when the unsettling encounter unfolded, though the hospital seemed anything but ordinary that day. The air in the sterile corridors carried an inexplicable heaviness, as if unseen eyes lingered just beyond the edges of perception. In the heart of this unnerving stillness, a woman, let's call her Margaret, entered the hospital to refill her medication. As she waited near the pharmacy, she decided to use the nearby bathroom, one tucked close to an operating and waiting room. The bathroom, though brightly lit, felt oddly unwelcoming. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly, casting sterile reflections on the tiled walls. Margaret entered the restroom and chose a stall. Moments later, the sound of the door creaking open interrupted the quiet. An older woman shuffled in, leaning heavily on a walker. The tap of the walker's rubber-tipped legs against the tiles echoed in the small space. Margaret observed through the gap beneath her stall door as the woman moved toward the larger stall and entered. Just as the stall door clicked shut, another figure appeared, a younger woman, whose brisk movements contrasted sharply with the older woman's labored pace. Without hesitation, the younger woman followed the older one into the stall. Margaret frowned, puzzled. It wasn't unusual for a caretaker to assist someone in need, but something about this interaction felt off. The bathroom fell silent again, save for the faint hum of the lights and the occasional distant murmur of hospital activity. After a few minutes, the younger woman emerged from the stall. Her demeanor was calm, almost unnervingly so, as she left the restroom without a glance at anyone else. Margaret waited, expecting the older woman to follow, but the stall remained ominously quiet. A creeping unease settled over her. Another woman in the restroom, sensing the strange stillness, approached the stall. Hesitant but driven by curiosity and concern, she gently pushed the door open. What she saw stopped her cold. The stall was empty. Margaret, unable to quell her rising dread, stepped out of her own stall and joined the woman. Together they stared at the barren space where moments ago an elderly woman and her walker had been. The stall was immaculate, devoid of any trace of its former occupant. There was no walker, no footprints on the damp tile, no explanation. The two women exchanged wide-eyed glances, their breath shallow, their skin prickling with goosebumps. The impossibility of the situation loomed heavy between them, filling the small bathroom with an almost tangible dread. Margaret's mind raced. A spirit? The thought was absurd, yet no other explanation surfaced. The vivid image of the older woman, hunched over her walker, was seared into her memory. It had felt so real, so solid, yet now it was as if she had never existed. She and the other woman left the restroom in silence, their steps hurried and hearts pounding. The brightly lit corridors of the hospital offered no comfort. The world around them seemed colder, more alien. Margaret couldn't shake the sensation that something unseen lingered nearby, watching from the shadows of the mundane. To this day, Margaret revisits that moment in her mind, searching for answers, replaying the details over and over. Was it truly a spirit she'd encountered? And if so, how could something as tangible as a walker vanish along with it? The questions remain unanswered, leaving behind an enduring chill and the haunting memory of an encounter in broad daylight. Story 2. In the stillness of a neighborhood that seemed ordinary, House 404 stood, bearing secrets that no one dared to unveil. From the outside, it was unremarkable, yet within its walls lay a chilling tale of tragedy and terror that would unravel a family's sense of safety and reality. It began when a family moved into the house, a mother, her new husband, and her two children. The realtor had mentioned a peculiar detail during the showing. Roses taped to the walls were not to be removed. The comment, though strange, was dismissed. Who would keep roses stuck to their walls? The stepfather, practical and unbothered by superstition, pulled them down soon after the family settled in. And so the silence that cloaked House 404 began to shift. The disturbances started subtly. The youngest child, a 6-year-old boy, came home one afternoon to an empty house. He curled up on the couch, putting on his favorite movie, Snow Buddies, to fill the quiet. But the quiet didn't stay empty for long. He felt it first, a creeping unease that prickled at his senses. Then came the sound, footsteps pacing above him, deliberate and rhythmic, emanating from his brother's room, the lone space on the upper floor. When his brother returned home, the noises stopped, for a while. The family's dog, Bear, a loyal and protective Australian Shepherd mix, began to act strangely. He refused to venture upstairs, growling at the bottom step as if warding off something unseen. At night, he stationed himself outside the boys' door, a sentinel against an unknown threat. Then came the basement. The boy and his friends decided to play hide-and-seek there one afternoon. It was dimly lit and cluttered with shadows, the perfect setting for their game. One boy hid under the futon, another behind a TV speaker, while the youngest tucked himself behind the washer. But when the game ended, one of the boys emerged trembling and pale. He had heard a whisper, a woman's voice, soft and chilling, close to his ear. The boy's terror spread to the others when they noticed writing on the concrete wall near the washer. In red it read, "These roses shall not be removed. They keep her spirit at bay. I say goodbye, for I'll kill myself today." The friends never returned to House 404. Tensions escalated. Late one night, the stepfather's cousin sat in the living room, his gaze drawn to the glass door of the boy's room, which was supposed to be an office. He watched, frozen, as the boy's blanket lifted into the air, not once but 3 times before being yanked to the floor. Then, as if propelled by an invisible force, the boy was thrown across the room. His cries shattered the silence, drawing his parents in a panic. The stepfather, shaken and sleepless, began standing guard outside the boy's room, just as Bear did. His stoic disbelief gave way to a dread he couldn't rationalize. The family's stay in House 404 ended abruptly, but the terror lingered in their minds. Years later, driven by a mix of curiosity and unresolved fear, the boy, now grown, researched the history of the house. What he uncovered painted a macabre picture. Decades prior, a man had murdered his wife mere days after their wedding, then hung himself in the upstairs bedroom. Her body had been discovered sealed in a crawl space within the very room where footsteps had echoed and scratching had been heard. The roses taped to the walls had been from their wedding, and the man's scrawled note warned that removing them would unleash her spirit. As he pieced the story together, a chilling realization gripped him. The spirit had targeted him, the youngest in the house, perhaps because the woman, pregnant at the time of her death, had been denied the child she had longed for. The boy's presence was a bitter reminder of what she could never have. Even now, years removed from those events, the family struggles with what happened in House 404. The stepfather refuses to speak of it, haunted by memories of watching his child endure something he couldn't protect him from. The boy, now an adult, tries to rationalize the experiences, a skeptic clinging to logic in the face of the inexplicable. The footsteps might have been creaks from the house's foundation. The growling dog might have sensed an animal in the crawl space. The whispers could have been the imagination of frightened children. And yet, doubt lingers, a shadow as persistent as the spirit that once prowled House 404. Story 3? It's a story that haunts the corridors of a college to this day, a tale of dread whispered among students who dared to use the girls' restroom near the basketball court. Some say it's just a rumor, but for those who've encountered her, the scarred woman is all too real. The legend began with a chilling incident. One quiet afternoon, a girl and her close friend, a boy known for his easy laughter and playful spirit, stopped by the girls' restroom. While the girl freshened up, the boy thoughtlessly dropped a piece of trash on the floor. Almost immediately, an apparition appeared, a woman with a face grotesquely scarred, her fury palpable. The friends fled in terror, their story swiftly reaching the school administration. That night, the guards were instructed to burn incense in the restroom to appease the spirit. The tale spread, and the restroom became a focal point of fear. But for one student, the restroom's reputation was more than a story. She felt its oppressive presence from the first day she stepped onto campus. There was a heaviness in the air around it, an unshakable sense of being watched. Though she'd encountered ghosts before, this place carried an unease unlike anything she had experienced. She avoided the restroom whenever she could, though the alternative facilities were only marginally less disturbing. It was during her second year of college that the scarred woman made her presence undeniable. One day, after her class was delayed, she lingered in the corridor outside the infamous restroom. Her classmates had scattered, some absent, and others searching for an available classroom. Not wanting to lose her peers, she decided to stay close, right next to the doorway she dreaded most. The corridor was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that amplifies every small sound. Tentatively, she approached the restroom, her footsteps echoing in the emptiness. With one hesitant step inside, she froze. There, in the window, was a face. Scarred and twisted, it stared back at her, its presence a silent scream. The sight sent her heart racing. She stumbled backward and bolted out into the open basketball court, her breath ragged and her skin cold with fear. She stopped at the edge of the court, trying to make sense of what she'd just seen. Could it have been a prank? But as her eyes darted back to the window, she realized it was impossible. The window overlooked the open court. There was no one there, no place for a trickster to hide, and the campus was almost deserted during class time. Whatever she had seen, it wasn't human. Shaken, she decided to keep the encounter to herself. Ghost stories were often dismissed as figments of imagination, and she didn't want to face ridicule. Yet, over time, she found validation in whispered conversations. A shop owner near the school mentioned a janitress who had tragically died in a fire on campus. Classmates recounted their own strange experiences near the restroom. Each story shared a chilling detail that matched her own: the scarred face of a furious woman. Even now, she struggles to describe the encounter without the weight of fear creeping back into her voice. For those who've heard the tale, it's easy to brush off as another ghost story. But for her, and for those who felt the scarred woman's wrath, it's a haunting memory that lingers long after the final bell.